great pleasure and honour to be here again in the Academy and to address this select audience. I just returned last night, in fact, from Peru and visited Buenos Aires. I was done my little bit, perhaps, in promoting relations between those countries and England, or Britain, I should say. I should start with a quotation from the brilliant Uruguayan essayist José Enrique Rivera, who wrote at the beginning of the century. He said, when he compared San Martin, the liberator of Chile, and partial liberator of Peru and Bolívar, in which he said that whereas San Martin was merely a professional soldier, Bolívar embodied in its total complexity of means and forms the energy, the entire energy of the revolution of independence in Spanish America. Because on the one hand, he was a caudillo, which is to say, a leader of the masses, charismatic in terms of his authority. On the other hand, he was a professional soldier, a general who marshalled full battalions of infantry and cavalry on the battlefield. And in third measure, he was a legislator and a statesman who aspired to create enduring forms of political governance in the country. He was something of a philosopher. So he was, in that sense, representative of a very broad range of talents. Just getting my watch out, I don't sleep too long. And let's, first of all, a few facts about his background. He came from one of the founding fathers of Caracas. He was an hacendado, part of that aristocracy. Early in his life, he married the daughter of a local marquis. He had therefore all the talents of the aristocrat in terms of riding horses and other such things, attending war to do, I suppose. But then he went to Italy, and he spent his ages from 16 to 23 in Europe, roughly from about 1897 to about 1805 or 6. And therefore, he went there as an aristocrat, he participated in the Spanish court, but thereafter he went to Paris, and he was there in 1804 in the coronation of Napoleon. Napoleon, of course, was a great exemplar for so many ambitious Latin Americans, eager for revolution, change, modernization, but also convinced perhaps of the need for strong leadership. He then travelled down south. He was in company with his former tutor, Simón Rodriguez, a Venezuelan, very idiosyncratic disciple of the French Enlightenment. And he, there in Rome, in the presence of his tutor in 1805, on Monte Sacro, solemnly swore to devote his life to the cause of independence. He was, of course, a member of, or a disciple of the French Enlightenment himself. The works of Plutarch, of Machiavelli, Montesquieu, Rousseau. These are the authors he cites times and times again. Rousseau and Machiavelli, of course, because of the problems of establishing, how to establish a permanent system of legislation and governance. When he went back to Spanish America, the country blew up, or the entire Hispanic world blew apart in those years 1808 to 10, when Napoleon and French troops imposed Joseph Bonaparte as King of Spain, forced the abdication of the Bourbons, and in consequence of which the central institutions of the monarchy dissolved and power returned to provincial juntas and institutions who began to raise their own forces, both in Spain itself, but also in South America. And in 1810, virtually all the colonies, apart from, I shouldn't really call them colonies, kingdoms, overseas kingdoms, states, apart from Peru, who was a very particularly strong Spanish viceroy, established their own juntas for independence. And in Mexico, of course, very good insurgents. Bolívar participated in all this in Caracas, but there the events were peculiarly mobile. It's known in Venezuelan history as the Fool's Republic, República Boba, because it's so badly governed. People had no idea really how to establish a government. They talk about principles, trying to create a constitution and so on, and they were overturned by popular rebellion. It was an earthquake destroyed part of the city. Bolívar then came in, was able to raise an army in Colombia. It's an admirable campaign, and that was his first great campaign. And to restore liberty, again another popular rising occurred, and he was driven out. And then by 1815, Spanish troops come back into South America and take one by one, repress the independent juntas that have been established, with the sole exception of Buenos Aires. So this process of the Spanish-American Revolution is a lengthy one, it takes time. In 1817, Bolívar comes back to spend a couple of years around the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, goes back to, finds a base in the jungle zone of Venezuela, and there establishes contacts with the famous horsemen of the great interior plain, Los Llanos of Venezuela. These cowboys, gauchos, the same breed of men, highly adventurous, highly ferocious in their forms of warfare, very hard to discipline, and he succeeds in persuading the leaders of the llaneros to join him. So he's got a cavalry force, which he will carry with him throughout his future campaigns. But also, at this time, 1817 onwards, he receives the British and Irish and some German legionaries. Something like over 3,000 people from these islands eventually end up on the shores of Colombia and Venezuela. Many of them, of course, to succumb immediately to malaria or fevers and so on, but others to survive and to enlist in the infantry regiments that Bolívar was creating. It's with that conjunction of the two forces that he then has the brilliant idea, rather of attacking the Spanish forces in Caracas, which are very strong infantry, he pushes up the mountains, up the arduous climb into the Andes, into Colombia, and there at the Battle of Boyacá defeats the Colombians and therefore liberates that country, and in turn then, of course, is acknowledged as president of that country and is then able to slowly train an army, an infantry army, mixing in Colombians and British and Irish in order to finally drive the Spaniards out of Caracas. And that takes place in the famous Battle of Carabobo in 1822. So here we have Bolívar in full health at this time, and then he moves directly southwards, because by then San Martin had liberated Chile, and then in 1820 landed in Peru and finally succeeded in liberating Lima and the coastline, but failed to dislodge the royalist forces in the highlands, the Andean highlands, where they were based, and made once more Cusco, the ancient Inca capital, to be the capital of this final few area ranged based on Spanish form. I'm getting very dry, sorry. He then moves southwards, and it's at this point that he leads a I've got a very bad cold. Every time I go through an winter, I get a bad cold on antibiotics. So then, he confronts the Spaniards there, and the extraordinary campaign, whereas before that everyone thought, well, you go to Lima, you take Lima, you should climb up the mountains and hit the Spaniards at the top. But of course the problem is if you go up that heights, then your troops are in no condition for a battle. And also you don't have any easy logistical support. So instead of that, he goes to the north, into Piura, into the northern provinces of Peru, and then slowly leads his Venezuelan, Colombian, Peruvian army southwards to confront this highly trained Spanish army, which by then, of course, is mainly officered by Peruvians and with Indians as the basic infantry. And it's there in 1824, eventually the famous two battles of Junín, where he's present, and the Battle of Ayacucho, where his chief lieutenant, Jose Antonio, is there. And there is the Sucre, of course, and then defeats the Spaniards. And with that one battle, Spanish rule in South America comes to an end. But when one thinks he's been in campaign from about 1811 to 1824, and this is the extraordinary endurance of a man such as Bolívar, and also his ability to train a whole group around him of young officers loyal to him. And among them, of course, in his immediate entourage was an Englishman, son of Sir Robert Wilson, who was an Irishman, Simon O'Leary, and one or two others. Yeah. And it's rather amusing. I think one of them, William Ferguson, who actually laid down his life in defence of Bolívar in an assassination attempt. William Ferguson used to refer to Bolívar talking among the English as the old man. Yes. But he was also, at this point, once he had liberated, a legislator. And he was the founder, of course, of Bolivia. Bolivia is an independent state. I think the Peruvians are never quite forgiven him for that. He divided the Andes into two. It's really a natural union between the southern Andes and Peruvian Andes and Bolivia. But he chose to listen to the voices of the lawyers of Chuquisaca and La Paz and created the independent state of Bolivia. And of course named after himself. And he then sat down and endowed it with a constitution, the most elaborate constitution, a tricameral legislature with a hereditary Senate, and I think a hereditary vice presidency as well. It's a document rather than, of course, a living creation. It's a document which he wanted in order to, as his legacy, to express his philosophy and to hope, of course, to provide sound governance for the future of the continent. But alas, although he was at this time at the summit of his authority, he was dictator of Peru, he used that title, it's still a classical title, president of United of Colombia, the Great Colombia, of course. And then he made this Sucre the president of Bolivia. But in the end, it all came tumbling down. He was resented in Peru. He had to return to Colombia, where again the rivalries between Venezuelans and Colombians came to a fore. There was a conflict over territory between Peru and Colombia, and it turned to a civil war between parties in 1828. And then slowly, his power slowly ebbed away. There was an assassination attempt. By this time, anyway, he was sick from the various fevers he'd suffered during his life. And so he ends up on the coast of Colombia with his life at an end. But it was an extraordinary career. And as I quote from Jose Enrique Rodó, he said that Bolívar, Simón Bolívar, he said he personified all that is characteristic in our history, the history of Spanish America, of the Spanish republics. He is the clay of America, moved by the breath of genius. And his letters still survive. His letters and documents are published in 3 thick volumes, and they are extraordinary testament to his memory and to his action. And anyone trying to understand that revolution, trying to understand the man and the epoch, would find the best explanation in the letters and documents of Simón Bolívar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a fascinating talk. Wonderful conversation with such a complex, rich life in a relational period of time. So